Imagine you're me. My name is Elena, I'm 38, and I'm staring at a $60,000 mountain of debt that feels like a terminal diagnosis. When I see headlines about celebrity bankruptcies, I think, if someone with millions can lose it all, what hope do I have? Right now, I feel like I'm drowning in a swimming pool. But today for Mars Uncle Median, we're looking at someone who was drowning in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We're diving into the financial anatomy of Michael Jackson. In June 2009, the world was told the king of pop was completely broke. The news cycles were obsessed with his $500 million in debt, his dwindling cash, and the imminent foreclosure of his home. But if we actually read the research, we find a story that isn't about a man who lost everything. It's a story about the difference between being broke and being illiquid. It is a masterclass in asset acquisition that resulted in a $3.5 billion recovery by mid-2026. Why does this distinction matter to you? Because the way the Jackson estate moved from the red to the black is the logic that separates winners from those who just work for a paycheck. Let's pin down what was actually true in 2009. Most people confuse liquidity with solvency. Liquidity is how much cash you have in your pocket right now to buy a sandwich. Solvency is whether your total stuff is worth more than your total bills. In 2009, Michael Jackson had less than $700,000 in cash. For a man with his overhead, that is functionally zero. He was accruing interest at high rates and was less than 2 weeks away from losing his most valuable assets to creditors. He was, by every definition of the word, cash poor. But he was never truly broke. To understand how a negative $500 million starting point turns into a $3.5 billion empire, we have to look at the ladder he built. The first rung was established in 1985. Jackson was criticized for overpaying $47.5 million for the Sony ATV music publishing catalog, which included the Beatles songs. People called it a vanity project and said he was wasting his Thriller earnings. But this was an elite-level asset acquisition. By the time of his death in 2009, that catalog alone was valued at over $1.5 billion. That is a 30-fold increase. This was his financial lifeboat. While the media focused on the debt, they ignored the fact that he held a 50% stake in an asset worth triple that amount. This is what we call a crown jewel asset. In your own life, this might be a home in a gentrifying area or a highly specialized skill set. It is the thing that grows faster than your debt can compound. However, the problem in 2009 was that Jackson couldn't sell a piece of a song to pay his electric bill. He was asset-rich and cash-starved. When he passed away, his executors stepped into a chaotic situation. They had to execute a strategy to clear the debt without destroying the long-term value of the empire. The goal was to move the debt and let the assets breathe. Between 2009 and 2026, the estate generated over $3.5 billion in gross revenue. They didn't just wait for royalty checks. They ran the tape forward and looked at how to monetize a legacy. They produced projects like This Is It, collaborated with Cirque du Soleil, and launched a Broadway musical. They turned a person into a platform. Let's look at the inflection band. This is where the math starts to get really interesting. In 2016, the estate made a decisive move. They sold their remaining 50% stake in Sony ATV back to Sony for $750 million. This wasn't a desperate move. It was a tactical one. It allowed them to wipe the slate clean of the debt that had been hovering over the family for a decade. By 2024, they finalized another blockbuster deal. They sold half of Michael's personal publishing and master recording rights to Sony for an additional $600 million. This deal valued the total catalog at somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 billion. Now, you might ask, why sell half? Why not keep it all? This is where we talk about the catch fire threshold. When you have an asset that valuable, you can take some chips off the table to secure the future. You still get to ride the growth of the remaining half. By mid-2026, the Michael Jackson estate reached a staggering valuation of $3.5 billion. But the real explosion didn't come from old songs alone. It came from the 2026 biopic titled Michael. Released in April 2026, it became the first biographical film in history to cross $1 billion at the global box office. This wasn't just a movie, it was a massive valuation shift for his image rights. It proved that the brand of Michael Jackson was more durable than the person had ever been. We see this in the streaming numbers too. By 2026, Jackson maintained over 102 million monthly listeners on Spotify. To put that in perspective, that is more than most current pop stars who are actively touring today. But this isn't a story without friction. Behind the vertical lines on the chart lie some very messy realities. The math only works if you can survive the legal battles. For nearly 2 decades, the estate has been stuck in probate. One of the biggest hurdles was a long-running war with the IRS. Originally, the IRS claimed the estate owed $700 million in taxes. It took until 2021 to largely resolve that dispute. But even in 2026, the Michael Jackson Family Trust has not been fully funded. Why? Because there is still a final pending valuation on what is known as the MyJack catalog. Then there's the 1994 clause. In 2026, it was revealed that the estate had to spend between $25 and $50 million on reshoots for the biopic. This was due to a secret clause in a 1994 legal settlement. It prohibited the dramatization of certain accusers' stories. The filmmakers were forced to cut over an hour of footage to stay within the legal lines. This is a reminder that even a billion-dollar asset can be hindered by historical liabilities. Even the heirs have had to fight for transparency. In May 2026, Paris Jackson secured a major court victory. A judge ordered the return of $625,000 in bonus payments made to outside law firms. These were deemed improper. It shows that even when you are worth billions, the details of the scoreboard still matter. If you aren't watching the leaks in the bucket, the size of the well doesn't matter. So, where does the money actually go? According to the Michael Jackson Family Trust filings revealed in 2026, the distribution follows a 40-40-20 rule. 40% goes to his children, Prince, Paris, and Biggie. Another 40% goes to his mother, Katherine Jackson, as a lifetime beneficiary. Once she passes, her share reverts back to the children. The final 20% is designated for charity. As of 2026, an estimated $400 million has been earmarked or distributed to global children's causes. This is the legacy part of the math. It's not just about the net worth, it's about the flow. Even with the uncontrolled leak of early 2026, the estate's value remained unshaken. Dozens of high-quality demos from the Thriller and Bad eras were exposed on the internet. Why? Because they had reached the statistical noise phase. When you generate $100 to $150 million in annual revenue, a few leaked songs don't move the needle. They are just background noise to a global empire. Let's look at the final scoreboard comparison. In 2009, net worth was negative $500 million. In 2026, it is $3.5 billion. In 2009, annual revenue was negligible. In 2026, it is over $100 million. In 2009, the catalog was a debt-laden weight. In 2026, it is a multi-billion-dollar engine. Michael Jackson's path isn't a blueprint for everyone. Most of us don't have a Beatles catalog in our back pocket. But the logic of the turnaround is universal. It is about identifying your high-value assets and managing your interest-bearing liabilities. You need the patience to let the math work over a 20-year horizon. Elena, our project manager, doesn't need a billion-dollar biopic. She needs to understand that her current debt is a liquidity problem. This isn't a life sentence, provided she owns assets that grow. We run the numbers on the decisions that shape the next 20 years. If you're wondering what happens when you factor in inflation on these multi-billion-dollar estates, we'll run those numbers in the next one.